In our last lesson, we saw how Spring Boot's application.properties file can be used to load an active profile. And to do that, we use the spring.profiles.active property. Continuing on, we're going to take a look at another approach to specifying conditional properties with profiles. This approach will rely upon how we name our application.properties file. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy by hitting Control C and then paste our new application.properties file. And we'll need to rename this file. And what we do is we embed the profile name within the properties file. So I'm going to label this as my prod application prod.properties file, and that will define my production profile. Within each of these files, I'm going to remove the spring.profiles.active property, and within my prod profile, I'm going to switch the value of the my.messageValue property. So I'm going to put this to something like this is the prod profile, and that's just an indicator for us to determine what profile we are using. Now, within our application configuration file, I'm actually going to remove our second bean, and I'm going to remove our profile annotation from the myMessage method. So at this point, we only have one bean, and that bean is going to rely upon our properties in order to determine the message value. Now, our message value will differ depending upon which properties file we look at. So for the prod properties file, we have this static string, and then for the application.properties file, our just regular application.properties, we have a randomly generated value. Under this configuration, our program arguments are going to determine which profile is set. So if we look at the arguments for our Spring Boot Run configuration, you can see that we are passing in the prod profile. So that will cause the application-prod.properties file to be read. Now, if we did not specify this, and let's just remove it, and we'll apply it, and then we'll run our application is going to default to the application.properties file. So let's go hit localhost, and there we see we get our random value. Now, if we were to return to our run configurations and we look at the arguments for our Spring Boot application, we can add in the active profile property and specify it as prod. And if we apply that property and then stop our Spring Boot application and then restart it, you'll now notice that when we navigate to our application and we hit our context root, we get our prod profile applied. This is a great way to configure our applications because we can have our different application.properties files and the different profile specific versions right within our source code. And depending upon our environment, we can have different command line settings to choose which of these configuration files that we will actually apply depending on the profile. So you're able to see all of the different properties and easily switch between them using this approach. And if you are not in a specific profile, you can always default back to the application.properties configuration file. So there is some precedence built in that you can take advantage of. So in this lesson, we worked with the profile facilities within Spring Boot, and we learned how to create profile-specific application.properties files in order to determine our configuration.